The Year to Their podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Year to Their, it's time to start the fun.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week. Could you imagine if I was like that every week? Who would tune in and listen? Not me. Anyway, welcome to the Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host, Phil Gramlich, and each and every week I'm going to bring you a different Walt Disney World word and then give you some history, some tips, some background info, some, you know what, all kinds of cool stuff about that Walt Disney World word. All right, so let's get right into it. This week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week is brought to you by the letter O. O for Omnimover. That's right, this week I wanted to give you a little bit of history and background on the Omnimover attractions in the Disney theme parks. Now, there is and has been controversy as far as which attractions actually use the Omnimover system. Hopefully with this episode, I'll be able to clear that up for you and you'll know exactly what is an Omnimover and what is not. And spoiler alert, the People Mover is not an Omnimover. They sound very similar, but they're actually totally different ride systems. All right, so let's get into the Omnimover system. And the Omnimover is a ride system that was invented by Roger Broggie and Bert Brundage before 1968 and patented in April of 1968. And actually, the name Omnimover was created by Disney legend and Imagineer Bob Gurr, who combined the word OmniRange, which was a navigation system for aircraft, with the word People Mover, which is obviously the People Mover, and we ended up with Omnimover. So like I said, it was patented in April of 1968 by WED, which was Walter Elias Disney, and is now WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering. And 1968 means that it was not actually used in the 1964-1965 New York World's Fair. I've actually heard the story that it was an Omnimover system that moved guests through the Ford Magic Skyway attraction at the World's Fair, but in fact, that is not true. It wasn't an Omnimover system back then. The Ford Magic Skyway actually used individual shells of Ford automobiles that were propelled along a track. So they were individual ride vehicles and not an Omnimover system. And there you have it. So yeah, it is widely reported that Ford's Magic Skyway was an Omnimover, but in fact, it wasn't. Anyway, so what exactly is an Omnimover and what are you supposed to get out of it? Well, when Roger Broggie and Bert Brundage designed this system, they wanted to place guests in the scenes of a movie. They wanted to completely control the line of sight that a guest has on an attraction so that they only see what the designers wanted them to see. This also would allow the designers of the attractions to hide the show elements out of sight of the guests. So things like lighting and speakers and other things like that are actually behind the guest. And it's almost impossible for guests to be able to see these things while on the Omnimover attractions. The entire system is actually connected by a chain that is hidden under the floor and remains in a constant motion. So yes, all the vehicles are connected to one another in the Omnimover system. The vehicles maintain a consistent speed and, of course, a consistent distance from each other. And the vehicles are loaded and unloaded of guests by using a conveyor belt that operates right alongside the track and also moves at the exact same speed or very, very closely to the speed of that track. Then throughout the attraction, there are guide rails that your vehicle will come into contact with that will swivel the vehicles so you only see exactly what the Imagineers or the designers want you to see. It's pretty ingenious. It's an amazing system. It's worked for 50 years, and it has only recently in the last 20 to 25 years been updated to where guests have more control of their vehicles and what they see, a la Buzz Lightyear Spice Ranger. No, that's not right. Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin. So one of my favorite stories about the Omnimover ride system goes back to Bob Gurr, who I mentioned, and actually the design of the Haunted Mansion. As you may have heard, or as I've said on this show before, the Haunted Mansion was originally going to be a walk-through haunted house type attraction. But it was Bob Gurr who thought that it should be an Omnimover system once he saw how well the other Disney Omnimovers were doing. They moved the guests in and out very quickly. The capacity was great. The load and unload times were unparalleled. But again, there was one issue. He didn't want guests to have that much of a line of sight on the attraction. As a matter of fact, he wanted even less of a line of sight for the Haunted Mansion than any Omnimover attraction that came before it. So as the story goes, or as Bob Gurr has actually told himself, he was sitting at a coworker's desk when he noticed a half-eaten flattened candy apple on the desk. It was kind of in like a clamshell shape, and he picked it up, he put the stick in between his two hands, and he spun it, and he saw that he could control exactly what the guests saw and would have more coverage and an overhang with that clamshell style shape. So again, as legend goes, that is how the Doom Buggy was born. Pretty cool, right? All right, so here's where I'm going to get super nerdy and technical on you, so I hope you're ready. Here we go. Which attractions have actually used the Omnimover system? Well, the first one was out in Disneyland in 1967, and that was the now gone but not forgotten Adventures Through Inner Space. So on Adventures Through Inner Space, you would board your Atommobile and go through a mighty microscope, which would shrink you down into the size of an atom. You would actually go through a very windy track, and the story was it was an unstable, kind of crazy world of a melting snowflake. The attraction had a narration by Paul Frees, who's the same narrator as the ghost host of the Haunted Mansion. And like the Haunted Mansion, it was set up very cinematically where you would go through different scenes. And again, you only saw what Imagineers wanted you to see. Now, Adventures Through Inner Space closed in 1985 and was replaced in Disneyland by Star Tours. The next attraction that featured the Omnimover system was, in fact, the Haunted Mansion that opened in Disneyland in 1969 and is still pretty darn close to the original attraction today. Of course, there are different Haunted Mansions in different parks that use the Omnimover system all over the world, including obviously Disneyland, Magic Kingdom, Tokyo Disneyland, and in Disneyland Paris. Another attraction that utilizes the Omnimover system is Peter Pan's Flight. Yes, you do fly on this one. You aren't connected to the Omnimover on the floor, but instead over your head. But it is, in fact, the same design and the same system, just kind of upside down and inverted. And of course, Peter Pan's Flight can be found in Magic Kingdom, in Disneyland, in Tokyo Disneyland, and in Disneyland Paris. In 1972, the Magic Kingdom opened a new Omnimover attraction called If You Had Wings. If You Had Wings was basically a commercial for Eastern Airlines, and you went through several different scenes showing locations of where Eastern Airlines flew. The Eastern Airlines sponsorship ended in 1987, and that attraction's name was changed to If You Could Fly. And that version of the attraction did not go very well with guests. They did not enjoy it. It was quickly closed. And that building was dormant for a while until Delta picked up the sponsorship of the attraction, and the name was changed to Delta Dream Flight. And then pretty much the same exact thing happened. Delta lost their sponsorship or gave up their sponsorship in 1996. And instead of trying to find a new sponsor for the attraction, Disney instead brought back If You Had Wings with a few minor changes and retools and called it Disney's Take Flight, which only lasted 2 years, closing in 1998 and eventually going on to become the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin attraction. So basically, that was a long way to say that none of those attractions really worked in that space until Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin came on board. Now, when Epcot opened in 1982, the rumor was that there were 4 different Omnimover attractions in the park. They were World of Motion, Horizons, the Living Seas, and Spaceship Earth. So all of those Omnimover attractions that were in Epcot's early days, please step forward. Whoa, 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 whoa. Not so fast, Spaceship Earth. You see, according to Bob Gurr, once again, Spaceship Earth is not an actual Omnimover system. Bob Gurr says, and I quote, "The Omnimover is a connected endless chain of vehicles. The Haunted Mansion is an Omnimover. Spaceship Earth is not an Omnimover, but a one-of-a-kind vehicle conveyor, totally unlike and sharing no parts with an Omnimover." Apparently, Bob Gurr disagreed so much with the design system of Spaceship Earth that Disney Imagineering moved him on to a different project. So there you go. Spaceship Earth, it does load and unload at a continuous rate, but is not actually an Omnimover at all. As for World of Motion in Epcot, that was replaced by Test Track in 1999. And the much-loved Horizons was replaced by Mission Space in 2003. As for the Living Seas, as we all know, that attraction became the Seas with Nemo and Friends back in 2007. Since the construction of those attractions, we have had other Omnimover attractions built, as I mentioned, the Buzz Lightyear attractions. And they were built in Disneyland, Magic Kingdom, Tokyo Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, and Hong Kong Disneyland. And the latest two Omnimover attractions that were built by Disney are the Little Mermaid attractions. Now in Disney California Adventure, the attraction is called The Little Mermaid Ariel's Undersea Adventure. And in the Magic Kingdom in New Fantasyland, the attraction is known as Under the Sea Journey of the Little Mermaid. Now, currently, those are all of the Omnimover attractions that have been built for the Disney parks. And taking a look ahead to the future in Star Wars Land and Toy Story Land, at least as of right now, there doesn't seem to be any new Omnimover attractions being built. But, of course, never say never. Who knows what the future has in store for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and for the rest of the Disney parks worldwide. And that is going to do it for this week's Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. As always, thank you so much for listening to this episode and every other episode that you have listened to or will listen to or are telling people to listen to. It is always greatly appreciated. This was a fun one, and I do enjoy digging up facts and stories about the Disney parks and the history and their construction and all that good stuff. I actually didn't know that Spaceship Earth was not an Omnimover attraction. Now, looking at it, obviously, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, that attraction is unlike any other Omnimover attraction, but I just assumed that's the system that it used. But according to Bob Gurr, and who else would you trust but the man who built these Omnimover attractions himself, that's simply just not the case, and it is a completely unique ride system inside Spaceship Earth. So, hey, you learn something new every day, I guess. So that's very cool. So like I said, thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate it. And if you did enjoy this episode, please just tell someone about it. You're a Disney fan. That's why you're listening right now. Whether you're on the treadmill, you're in the car, you're out walking, you're somewhere. Please just tell another Disney fan, and that fan can tell another fan, and so on and so forth. I just want to spread the word. Thank you so much in advance. And just remember, there will be a new episode of the Walt Disney World Word of the Week each and every Wednesday morning, and a new episode of the Ear to There podcast each and every Monday morning. So until next time, thank you again so much for listening. Have a great week. Bye-bye.